Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa alihi tahirin. We are on lesson 12 of our Ilm al-Akhlaq, or our study of the science of morality or ethics. And we're continuing to talk about some of the topics about the faculty of Gadabiyah, al-Guhwa al-Gadabiyah. Now, last time I said that there's a hadith from Zorara, from Abu Ja'far alayhi salam, which said Ali ibn al-Hussein alayhi salam would say, "It is fascinating to me, la yujibuni, it is fascinating to me when a man's forbearance saves him from his anger." And we had another hadith that which is from Hisham ibn al-Hakam, the famous companion, from Abu Abdullah alayhi salam, who said, "I do not love to humiliate my soul even to achieve the best of bounties. I have not swallowed a drop more beloved to me than the drop of my anger, for which I did not seek compensation from the source that had caused it to stir up." So continuing on the faculty of Gadabiyah, the faculty of anger. So continuing on the faculty of anger. So the neglect of this faculty of anger, the negligence of this faculty of anger, of the faculty of al-Ghadabiyah, is cowardice. So one of the vices which is on the neglect side of this kuwa is cowardice. Cowardice is a timidity in times and situations which require courageous actions. Like if you are out camping in the wild and all of a sudden you are attacked by a wild animal. Naturally, you'd be courageous and start to struggle back. You'd be courageous and maybe get rid of this animal. You would struggle back against this animal. But cowardice is to have timidity in times and situations which require courage. Now, of course, we have to weigh these with intellect and religion and things like that. Some areas require courage, but sometimes there is a rational type of exit to the situation. Like if a wild animal is there, say you're walking in the woods and there's a poisonous snake. If you're able to get away from that snake without getting bit or killing the snake, of course, that's just rational to get away from it. But if you were in a situation where it's either you getting bit by the snake and there's no way of exit or killing the snake, you would take a courageous action. You would be courageous. So of course, unless one can escape from the danger altogether, here one must be rational and escape from the danger, of course. So one must be a rational person as well, because remember, the faculty of Gadabiyah, the faculty of Shahwiyah, the faculty of Wahmiyah, they all have to have the Amir, the Imam of Aql above it. So they all have to be in line with Aql. Intellect has to be governing. And Aql intellect recognizes Allah, worships Allah, serves Allah, and realizes the importance of the authentic line of Islam. So religion and Aql, they are necessary functions, necessary directions, necessary regulations for all these faculties, Ghadabiyah, Shahwiyah, Wahmiyah. So how to treat this malady? If a person has timidity, cowardice, in times and situations which require courageous action, How does a person treat this malady? To treat this malady is to stimulate courage, to stimulate courage in oneself. Of course, where it is not too dangerous to do so. And also where rationality and religion do not prohibit or prevent oneself from doing so. One stimulates this courage until one arrives at the condition of developing the virtue of courage. So you continue to stimulate this courage until one arrives at this golden mean of the virtue of courage. After this person must be on guard. Person must not let down his or her guard, not to move from this state of courage, this state of moderation, into excess or back into neglect, as both are harmful. What were excess and neglect here? We had cowardice was the neglect. Excess was irascibility, condemnable anger. So one must be careful and on guard not to slide backwards and not to go too far ahead. So they have to keep a balance. They have to keep it balanced and keep it in the position that it's in, so they don't fall behind and develop and fall back into the vices on the way to cowardice, or fall into cowardice, or go too far ahead so that they go into the vices which are closer and closer to irascibility until they reach irascibility. So they have to be very careful. Now the golden mean of courage, the golden mean of al-Guhwa al-Ghadabiyya, of the anger faculty, is courage. This is the virtue. This is the faculty of anger in the state of its balance. Its wazn is balanced. So its golden mean is courage. And is the subservience of the faculty of anger under the faculty of Aqliya. So the Aql is the leader of this faculty of Ghadabiyya now. So the Aql is the Amir, the Aql is the Imam of Al-Guhwa al-Ghadabiyya. This is achieved through forcing oneself by taking initiative, determination, by moving your feet and your hands and your words and your actions in line with developing courage. So this is achieved through forcing oneself. Pick up the reins of ikhtiyar. Move with the determination and force oneself with good habits. Good habits that are against the cowardice and irascibility, against the neglect or the excess. So that is how you achieve this golden mean of courage. You do actions which are against the vices, and you force yourself to do them until you make it a habit, and then it removes the vices and establishes a malaka, a fixed quality of virtue. So here you're coming to the virtue of courage, the golden mean of al-Guhwa al-Ghadabiyya, through continuous action and until you make it habit against those vices of cowardice or irascibility. As was indicated earlier, many other vices can occur and can arise from these faculties. So many different vices can spring up related to al-Guhwa al-Ghadabiyya. Mola Nawraki, he states that the faculty of anger can be afflicted with 17 different vices. 17 different vices. Here I shall bring just some of them that he mentions. So there's more that he mentions, but just some of them that he mentions out of the 17 different vices that he mentions. The first one is fear. And what is fear? Fear is an uneasy expectation that something unpleasant may occur. Fear is an uneasy expectation that something unpleasant may occur. Like if someone is having a fear of boarding a ship or flying in the air in an aeroplane. One who boards a ship may fear drowning. They may be having replaying images and imaginations of the Titanic sinking. One who's flying on a plane, they may be having imaginations of that plane falling from the air. So fear is an uneasy expectation that something unpleasant may occur. Like if someone is having a fear of boarding a ship or flying in a plane, or having the fear of being alone in the house at night. For some people, they could have fear of being alone in a house at night. What if something happens? What if there's a burglar? What if there's a break-in? So they could have fear of being at home alone at night. This is different than cowardice. This is different than cowardice. This is having a type of fear. However, not all fears are bad. We have good fear and we have bad fear. We have positive fears and negative fears. We have natural fears, we have intellectual fears, we have imaginative fears. So not all types of fears are actually bad, but we must divide the types of fears and understand which of them are bad and which of them are okay and which of them are meritorious. So we can divide fears into two types, broad categories. The first type are good fears. Now, the utmost good fear is the fear of Allah the Exalted. This is a good fear. Then you have fear of committing sins. Fear of committing sins. And the fear of the adhab of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the punishment of Allah the Exalted in the fire or in the barzakh. So these are good positive fears. These are fears in which will help the human being progress. Like if they have a fear of Allah, they have fear of distancing themselves from Allah, they have fear of committing sins, they have fear of the punishment of Allah. These are positive fears. They are good fears and they help mankind to direct themselves in the right direction, to move like as if they are driving in a dark night. Fear is like a headlight. It's one of the headlights. The second one, you need hope. So hope and fear. But fear is a very important light to see in the darkness. Fear is these types of fear are positive fears. The second type of fears are fears of things other than Allah. Fears of other than Allah. Those fears that don't go back to obedience to Allah. So fears of things other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Here, what we can do is we can subdivide these types of fears of other than Allah into two types. The first are natural and rational fears. So that's natural and rational fears. Like if you walking in the woods and you see a giant snake in front of you, you'll jump back maybe. That's a natural fear. If you stumble upon a fire, to move away from it, that's a natural fear. So there's natural and rational fears. The second subdivision of fears of other than Allah are fears which are related to the vice of cowardice. Those fears which are related to the vice of cowardice. So we can say then fears can be divided into two broad categories: positive fears and negative fears, good fears and bad fears, and good fears and fears of other than Allah. So you have good fears, positive fears, you have fear of Allah, fear of committing sins, fear of the azab of Allah. Then you have the fears of other than Allah, and here you have some positive and then you have negative. You have natural and rational fears, and then you have negative fears which are related to the vice of cowardice. Sometimes there are fears which are caused by the thought of the possibility of something unpleasant happening to oneself. So sometimes a person has fears which are caused by the mere thought of the possibility of something unpleasant happening, either to oneself or to someone dear to them, or something like or something like that. It's like if a person is afraid of death, they have this possibility that they may die today. Maybe they'll have a fear of being scared of death, or the deceased bodies. You go to do ghusl al-mayt, and they fear the deceased bodies, that this cause some possibility that something is going to occur here in their minds. So sometimes the mere possibility of something unpleasant happening produces some kind of fear in the mind or in the soul of the person. The cause of this problem is actually a spiritual weakness. This problem is rooted in a spiritual weakness, which can be removed by self-examination. The spiritual weakness can be removed by self-examination. As an example, if one has realization that he or she cannot avert a certain or probable danger of death, and the fear is in fact no use, and there is no use in averting it, this person will gradually decrease in his or her fear about it. They'll gradually decrease in their fear about it. If the fear of death is caused by hubat dunya, love of the dunya, so inshallah we'll talk about then, a person should reduce their attachment. They should reduce their attachment. Really, the best way is if we love for the sake of Allah. We love through Allah. So that way, because if we're close to Allah, we'll never be distant from Allah. We get close to Allah, we'll be safe. Everything else will leave us. So some fears are actually caused by imaginary causes, such as the fear of the darkness, something maybe many children face and maybe some adults. Fear of darkness, or fear of a deceased body. These are imaginary fears. In these cases, one should put aside their imaginations and strengthen their resolve and their soul. So when you have an imaginary fear, what you do is you put aside your imagination, strengthen your resolve and your soul. Meritus fear is that type of fear of the majesty and greatness of Allah the Exalted, subhanahu wa ta'ala. This fear is called khashiyah and or rahbah. It can also be fear of committing sins and their consequential punishments that may await. The more one has such fear, the more effort he or she will make towards their spiritual development and their progress toward perfection. In fact, the more one has deeper understanding and knowledge about Allah the Exalted, the more one will have fear of His power. So let's look at this noble ayat of the Holy Quran. We have in Surah 35, ayat 28, وَمِنَ النَّاسِ وَالدَّوَابِ وَالْأَنَّامِ مُخْتَلِفٌ أَلْوَانُهُ كَذَلِكَ إِنَّمَا يَخْشَى اللَّهَ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ الْعُلَمَاءُ إِنَّ اللَّهَ عَزِيزٌ غَفُورٌ. The transinterpretation of it. And of men and nas, وَالدَّوَابِ and the beast, وَالْأَنَّامِ and the cattle, are مُخْتَلِفٌ أَلْوَانُهُ كَذَلِكَ, are various species of it likewise. إِنَّمَا يَخْشَى اللَّهَ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ الْعُلَمَاءُ, those of His servants only who are possessed of knowledge fear Allah. Those who have knowledge only fear Allah. Only fear Allah from His servants, the ulama, those who have knowledge. Inna Allah azizun ghafur. Verily, certainly Allah is the mighty, the forgiving. So this is positive fear. With knowledge comes this positive fear. Fear of Allah obliterates other fears. Hence, a person will become courageous. A person will become courageous. Then we have in Surah 5, ayat 44. فَلَا تَخْشَوْا النَّاسَ وَيَخْشَوْنَ. Therefore, fear not the people and fear me. And we have Surah 98, ayat 8. جَزَاؤُهُمْ عِنْدَ رَبِّهِمْ جَنَّاتُ عَدْنٍ تَجْرِي مِنْ تَحْتِهَا الْأَنْهَارُ خَالِدِينَ فِيهَا أَبَدًا رَضِيَ اللَّهُ عَنْهُمْ وَرَضُوا عَنْهُ ذَلِكَ لِمَنْ خَشِيَ رَبَّهُ. Their reward with their Lord is gardens of perpetuity beneath which rivers flow, abiding therein forever. Khalidina fiha abada. Radiyallahu anhum. Allah is well pleased with them. وَرَدُّوا عَنْهُ, and they are pleased with him. ذَلِكَ لِمَنْ خَشِيَ رَبَّهُ. That is for him who fears his Lord. That is for him who fears his Lord. Surah 98, verse 8. Then we have Surah 79. Surah 79, ayat 40 and 41. وَأَمَّا مَنْ خَافَ مَقَامَ رَبِّهِ وَنَهَى النَّفْسَ عَنِ الْهَوَىٰ فَإِنَّ الْجَنَّةَ هِيَ الْمَأْوَىٰ. And as for him who fears to stand in the presence of his Lord and forbids the soul from hawa, from desires, they transinterpret as low desires, then surely the garden, فَإِنَّ الْجَنَّةَ هِيَ الْمَأْوَىٰ, then surely the garden, that is the abode. There are many ayats. Many ayats in the Holy Quran talking about fearing of Allah the Exalted. It must also be kept in mind that even in fearing Allah, one must be careful to keep within the bounds of moderation. Hence, one should not become hopeless of the mercy of Allah the Exalted. Hope and fear are like two lights. You need both lights to be able to make the journey. You need hope and fear. So you have to have a balance here. You have to have fear and hope. You cannot forget fear and only have hope. You cannot forget hope and only have fear. You have to have a balance. We have Surah 15, ayat 56. Kala wa man yaknatu min rahmati rabbihi illa ad-dallun. He said, and who despairs of the mercy of his Lord except the astray, except the deviants, the astray ones. Ad-dallun. We say in Surah Fatiha, right? Wal-dallin. So ad-dallun, they are the ones in this verse who despairs of the mercy of Allah except ad-dallun. So that's Surah 15, ayat 56. So if fear of Allah has went to an extreme, if the fear of Allah the Exalted has gone to an extreme, then a person must counter that fear with hope in the mercy of Allah the Exalted. We find in Surah 15, ayat 49 and 50, Nabi ibadi anni anna al-ghafuru al-rahim wa anna adhabi huwa al-adhabu al-alim. Inform my servants that I am the forgiving, the merciful, and that my punishment, that is the painful punishment. With transinterpretation of it. So you need hope and fear. You need hope and fear. That is a positive type of fear in Allah. Now, one more I'll mention, then we'll move to another topic in next week's lesson. So the second vice is hastiness. This is a state which impels someone to abrupt decisions and actions without proper thought before embarking on them. The opposite of this vice is to have thoughtfulness in action and speech. Haste is actually detrimental. Being hasty is detrimental and is associated with the companion of regret and tawbah. In many cases, the damage caused by hastefulness, actions or hasteful actions are irreversible. Hence, to cure oneself of this ugly vice, one must understand the negative consequences of hastiness, and become accustomed themselves to dignified and thoughtful behavior. That's how they will counter this vice of hastiness. So that is everything for this lesson. Wa akhiru da'wana and alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.